So if you're leading a team of people, whether that's a small group or it's a large group, and whether you've been doing it for a long period of time or you're just starting out, chances are, like me, you have probably been in situations where that team has not gelled as well as you have liked. You have probably either really frustrated that team or that team has probably really frustrated you. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to explore 3 ways that the Working Genius framework can make a real difference for the way that you lead your team and the way that your team operates. So before we get to those 3 ways, I want to just back up a little bit and tell you a bit about my story. So I've been leading groups for quite a while. I explained a little bit about that in the last video. You can click the link down below. But a lot of the experiences that I'd had been really good. The teams had really gelled. Things had really flowed nicely. We had really seen some successes. And then I got a role in the training team I was in where I was one of the trainers, and then I was given the role to lead that training group, a team of 10 to 12 trainers up and down the country in Australia and in New Zealand. And we were a remote team. We weren't all in the same place very often. And what I found when I started to get into this leadership role, to lead these meetings, to get everybody together, to work on the projects that we were working with, lots of different things were going on. What I discovered after the first 2 or 3 meetings and then catching up with people individually, I started to realize that there was some real friction happening. Now, there were some personalities and there were some things to do with just the place that we were in as a team at that time. But I started to realize that there were things that I was doing in fronting up to that group, the way I was leading those meetings, that were really frustrating people, that were really putting a bit of friction. There just didn't seem to be a flow. And so we were coming to the end of these meetings and you just knew that there was something not quite right. It was after those 3 or 4 meetings that I was told about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Somebody mentioned it and I went away and read it, and then that led me to the Working Genius. Both of those frameworks come from Patrick Lencioni's The Table Group. And they've put together these frameworks and concepts and workshop ideas for teams to really start to be able to gel. And when I got into the Working Genius framework, and there's an assessment you can do, you can jump in and I'll explain what the Working Genius looks like. What I discovered once I actually worked out what my geniuses were and we did some work as a team about what those geniuses were, we all of a sudden realized 3 key ways. It really did change things for the better, thank goodness, because things weren't going very well at that time. So I want to quickly explain what the Working Genius is. So the Working Genius, in a nutshell, it proposes that there are 6 different types of work that you can do in any job that you need to get completed. So whatever project you've got, there are 6 types of works you have to go through, and it spells widget, W-I-G-G-E-T. So the first widget, the first type of work that you get to is called the wonder. And so the wonder is a place where you're asking questions. And so this is a place where you're responding to the world around you, you're seeing the things that are happening, and you're just posing a bit of a question. The next genius is the invention or the ideas section. So that's where you're thinking of different solutions and things that you could do to solve that problem or answer that question that you're coming up with. So once you've asked the question, you've wondered, you've had an ideation phase, you've had some ideas, then you start to get into discernment. So that's where you're unpacking whether those ideas are going to be good or bad, whether they're going to fit for the context that you're in, whether it's the right time for that, who might be the people involved, those types of things. Once you've discerned, then the 3rd or 4th type of work is called galvanizing. So this is where you're getting people on board. You're organizing, you're selling the vision, you're inspiring people, and then coordinating and getting people moving in the right direction. So once you've galvanized, then you start to get into the enablement phase. And so the enablement phase is where you do the doing. You get a tick sheet list of all of the different things you need to do, and then you just get into it and you start doing the doing. It's really about helping people and enabling things to get completed. And then the last phase, tenacity, is when you finish things off. You're actually completing things, making things sure that things are done and finished at the right time and in the right way completely. And so those are the 6 types of work that every job has to go through to get to the end. You usually start at the beginning, you start moving through. Sometimes you might go back, sometimes you might go forward, but it has to go through those phases in some way, shape or form for that project to be successful. And the working genius framework says that every one of us is hardwired and designed to have two of those geniuses as the ones that we really have as our geniuses. Those types of work are the things that we are good at. We're naturally gifted. We could be developing skills in those areas, but they actually really give us joy. It's the idea that those two geniuses that we have are the things that fill our tank and we just love to do. Then the model says that there are two frustrations, and the frustrations are the things that drain your tank. You can maybe do it. A lot of us get quite good at doing those things, maybe because we have to, but we actually don't enjoy them. They don't fill our tank and give us energy. And then the last two that aren't your geniuses or your frustrations are your working competencies. And so they're kind of in the middle there. You might be okay at doing them. You could do them for a long period of time, but they're not going to give you joy. And over time, they're just going to start to wear you down. And so the working genius idea with your geniuses and your frustrations, it gives you an idea of the strengths that you can bring to your team, but it also helps you understand the things that you might not be so good at. But it's not just about you and how you contribute and take things to that group. The real value is in the team knowing each other and who you are as well. So it's about that team awareness of knowing what those geniuses are. And so here are the three ways that working genius made a big difference for me and the team that I was leading. And they'll definitely be things that I think you could grab onto and see a real value in how you lead. All right, number one, the working genius removes guilt and shame. Because one of the things that happens when you're in a group and you're leading the group, when you don't really have awareness of your strengths and weaknesses, what can happen is that you will come across situations where you're not that great in that space. And for me in that space, I'll just give you a little bit of insight. My geniuses are in the wonder and invention. My competencies are galvanizing and discernment, and then my frustrations are in enablement and tenacity. And in that group, because I wasn't great, or I'm not great at enablement and tenacity, I'm not that great at finishing things off and getting the details right. And what was happening in those groups is I was leading the groups towards those wonder and invention phases. I was great at coming up with ideas, and we were pitching new projects, and we were coming up with situations that we were really going to launch some things in. But the team was going away from those meetings feeling really frustrated because there wasn't really any decision made. There weren't details that were fleshed out, and over the weeks that went by, that there wasn't any follow-up, and that started to come back to me. There were questions made to me in those meetings about why I wasn't following up and getting stuff done. And so for me, it started to make me feel like I was a terrible leader. You start to take on all this guilt. You start to think, oh my goodness, like I'm just not really giving this group what they need, and it's because I'm just a terrible leader. When in actual fact, it's because it's not my genius. And the working genius gives you that awareness to know what are the areas that you're going to be able to really master and really have value for that team. But it enables you to realize that I don't need to feel guilt and shame about those situations. I can do things to, number one, let people know, hey, look, this is a real weakness of mine. This isn't something I'm strong at. I need your help. And so it pulls people in. It removes that need that you might have to try and be all things to all people at all times, because sometimes we think that's what leadership is. You're just the best at everything. When in actual fact, the working genius helps you realize that there are some things that you're great at, some things that you're not, and it helps everybody understand what that is. But most of all, it helps that small voice in the back of your mind before you go into meetings or when you're in meetings to remove that guilt and shame. Number two, the working genius unlocks empathy for your team and your team for you. Because when you understand what your geniuses and frustrations are, and then you understand your team's areas of strengths and weaknesses, their geniuses and frustrations, then there's a real understanding that you can have towards each other, because you've removed the guilt and shame on yourself. But what we tend to do when we don't understand other people is that when we see them failing at something or not being so strong at something or pulling something in an area that you know now is their genius, you don't judge them for those things. You actually have understanding, and then you can create a sense of empathy in the team. And the cool thing about that empathy is it removes those little, not only does it remove that voice of judgment that you have towards other people and people have towards you, but it starts to unlock a sense of vulnerability and a sense that we're all in this together and we're helping each other out. And that empathy then turns into a level of trust, which is actually the start of the 5 dysfunctions. One of the first dysfunctions is mistrust. And if you can overcome that and develop trust, then you can start moving through the other functions as well. We'll talk about that in future videos, or you can click the link down the bottom if you're interested in finding out more about the 5 dysfunctions. But that second key, the second way that we unlock that level of empathy really does lead to a whole lot of new gains and a new level of trust. And that's what happened in our team. As soon as we had gone through the assessment, we had worked in it as a team, we had understood what each other's geniuses are, where our frustrations were, we were able to understand each other. And a couple of ways that bore out in our team, there were a couple of people who were really strong in discernment, which, if you think back to it, that's a really important step in any project that you're working on. But because I was coming up with a lot of ideas and situations, and other people were as well, there were some other team members who were instantly bringing their genius to that situation and bringing in the discernment. Well, post working genius and the understanding of what that looks like, I was able to get away from the judgment and the negativity that I was feeling to some of the discernment that was coming my way by realizing that that's just their genius and what they're able to bring to our group. I understood the value that discernment had, and it made a really big difference. And the third way that working genius can make a big difference for you and your leadership and your team is that it gives you and your group a real focus and a language that feels like a leadership hack. So what do I mean by that? When you're talking about the working genius and you understand the idea that there are geniuses that we have and then there are frustrations that we have, and you can name those types of work, then you've got a language that you can use when you're describing certain types of meetings and focus shifts and things that need to happen. So one of the ways that this showed up for us is that we were able to put a label on some of the actions or some of the contributions that people were making in certain conversations and meetings. So we'd be in a situation where we were really wanting to discern something. We would actually call that out. Hey, look, this is great. We've got a whole lot of ideas. Why don't we just move into a discernment phase and let's just really unpick that? Or we would actually describe a meeting coming up in the language of the working genius. So we would say, hey, we've got a meeting about this particular project. We're running this event. We've discerned that this is the kind of idea. What we really need people to do is this is going to be a galvanizing meeting. And so we're going to ask you to come along and we're going to get on board and get the coordination. We've got some ideas in place. We may maybe tweak a couple of little things, but the focus of this meeting is a galvanizing meeting, and we're going to start getting some enablement happening as we're moving forward. So the great thing about that is that you can frame up a meeting, you can have a real focus for it because you've got the language for it. And then what that does is it frees people up to say, hey, that meeting's about galvanizing. You know what, I'm not in that space, or I'm not really involved in that project anymore. I'm going to leave them to it. Or at the start of a project, we would be working on something. We would say, hey, we want you to come along to this. This is a wonder and invention meeting, and we might be doing a little bit of discernment. So it's not going to be very detail orientated. We're just going to come up with some brainstorming ideas. Now, there were some people in our team who just really did not like that style of work. They were more in the enablement and tenacity execution phase. And so what they would say is, you know, hey, Mark, is it all good? I'm not really into that at the moment. I'm going to leave you guys to it. Let me know when you've got a plan in place, and I'll jump into the meeting and we'll help you execute it. And I'd be like, fantastic. That just freed up a whole hour of their day. They didn't need to come to that meeting because it was about an area of their working genius that wasn't something that was in their genius level. It was a frustration for them. So not only did they get to save time, but they actually didn't drain their tank because they were sitting there really not having anything to contribute or actually being a little bit frustrated. And the great thing for me too is that I didn't need to go to those execution meetings. I was more than happy to pass it off to somebody who we knew over time because we had the language and we understood each other's geniuses. I was able to say, hey, look, this particular person, you're a fantastic at execution. We know that E&T is your jam. We want you to go away and do that. Let me know if you need any help or if there's anything I can do to help you. So there you go. 3 ways that the working genius has transformed me and the groups that I've worked with. And I know that it's making a huge difference for groups all around the world. There are lots of teams that are jumping into the Working Genius and seeing it make a real difference for them and the way that they show up to their groups. If you like this content, we're going to be unpacking the Working Genius more in future videos. And if you'd like this in an email version into your inbox, there is a button on our website, goodgroups.co.nz. You can sign up for more information there, and we'll love to see you in that community and on the next video coming up soon.